My name is Richard Wolf. I'm a principal with Gross Mendelsohn, and I've been working with nonprofit organizations for over 20 years. I've served on numerous boards over the years, including the Bethel Congregation, the Bethel DeHaan Community School, the MACPA, the AICPA board, as well as Sports Boosters of Maryland. The best part of working with nonprofit organizations is knowing that the advice that you're giving is really helping an organization to fulfill and achieve their mission. I think an easy fix that many nonprofit CFOs can make is to think before you act. A lot of times we get calls after a grant has been issued or after the fact, and it becomes a lot more complicated and complex for us to unravel and unwind and figure out how to approach something. So sometimes it's important for CFOs to think and contact your service provider before a new grant proposal might go out, or before you're thinking about a new program service or a new fundraising event, just to be able to see what information am I going to need, how is this going to impact me either for my audit or tax return, and what do I need to know before we get started, as opposed to trying to figure it out after the fact. I think the costliest mistake that I see a lot of nonprofits make is not investing enough. And I know it seems counterintuitive, but a lot of times, especially from an accounting perspective, you need to invest money in order to get the correct information. A lot of times what we'll see is an RFP goes out and the organization will just select the lowest cost provider without really looking to see how much knowledge does this organization have regarding nonprofits, what's their expertise, working with organizations like mine. And that can be very important when you're dealing with things like an audit or a tax return, in terms of understanding that maybe paying a little bit more is better because you're getting better service, you're getting organizations who understand what you do and understand the risks and understand the pitfalls. The biggest area that nonprofits get tripped up during an audit tends to be documentation. It's extremely important that you retain and make available all documentation related to things such as contributions or grants or expense allocations. The documentation is extremely important for your auditor to be able to look at and to examine, to be able to complete their procedures. So the documentation becomes really important. I've served on nonprofit boards for over 20 years. When I graduated from college, I first got involved with nonprofit organizations and serving on boards. And I currently serve on the Bethel DeHaan Community School Board of Trustees. I think as a board member, it's important that you understand your responsibilities, both from a fiscal responsibility as well as a mission-based responsibility. You have two clear responsibilities to the organization when you serve on a board. The second thing is to ask questions. It's really important to ask questions, especially if you're new to a board. You might come into a situation where you don't have all the history and background. It's important, if you don't understand something, to ask those questions. And then third is to understand the organization's financial statements and financial position. You don't need to become an expert, you don't need to become an auditor or an accountant, but it's important to understand where the organization is financially and fiscally, and it's important to understand when the board is discussing things such as contributions and grants and revenue and expense allocations, that you understand what that means and how it will impact your organization. So for board chairs, I think the most important thing is communication. You need to really be clear in terms of understanding why another board member isn't pulling their weight. So communicating and being upfront about it is extremely important. Why is that person not pulling their weight? Do they feel disengaged? Do they feel not part of the process? Are they not excited about the role that they're in? Do they feel that their skill sets aren't being used properly? So these are all things that really need to come out to understand why is an individual not engaged, and hopefully how to re-engage that board member. For other board members, I think the most important thing that you can do is to ask questions. Asking questions of management, asking questions of the executive director, extremely important in terms of understanding your role and understanding the organization. And a lot of times you can sit on a board and the answer to a question will be, well, that's just the way that it's always been done. And as a board member, you need to push back on that, because sometimes the way that it's always been done isn't the right way, or isn't the way that it should be done going forward. So it's extremely important as a board member to ask questions of fellow board members, of the executive director, and of other members of management.